Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Neon and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we'll be seeing how well Lethal Company runs on the GTX 970 and the i7-6700K. Anyways, before we get into it, I just want to say that if you find this video useful or entertaining, subscribing is always appreciated. Anyways, let's go over the PC that we'll be using today. So this PC used to be a pre-built by CyberPower from around 2017 to 2018. Not all of the parts inside are original, like the RAM and the graphics card that we'll be using today. Inside we have the GTX 970, which is a graphics card released in late 2014. This specific model is the MSI 100 million edition, which is slightly overclocked compared to the base model. This graphics card has 4GB of VRAM, but as some of you may know, only 3.5 are really usable. And that's mostly because the final half a gigabyte is really slow. Anyways, the CPU that we'll be using is the i7-6700K, which is a 4-core 8-threaded CPU from 2015. You can of course overclock it for more performance in CPU intensive games or tasks, but for the purposes of this video, everything is running at its stock settings. Apart from that, the game is running on a SATA SSD, and we have 16GB of DDR4 running at 3200 MHz. Now that we have that out of the way, let's go ahead and get straight into the video. Getting started at the low settings at 1080p, you guys can see that as we load in, our FPS begin to be a little unstable, but once our frame rate stabilizes, we're getting between 160 and 170 FPS. However, once we get inside the facility, we gain around 10 to 15 FPS depending on what room that we're in, and this is most likely going to fluctuate a lot because depending on what you're looking at or what's going on, the game will perform differently, like especially if you're playing with other people or there's like a creature spawning in. All I'm trying to say is that the game will fluctuate a lot in terms of performance. Anyways, our RAM usage is relatively low, which is fairly common for these Unity games, and our 970 is actually not struggling too much. It's sitting at roughly around 50 to 80% utilization. Now moving on to the medium settings at 1080p, once again we see as the game loads in, our FPS do go up quite a bit once it stabilizes properly, and we are on March, which is a different moon, and this one is a bit more dense in terms of plants and trees. But regardless of that, we're getting a more than playable experience. Once we enter the facility, our frame rate stabilizes at around 150 to 170 FPS. At these settings, the game looks pretty nice, and the RAM usage and the CPU usage basically remain the same for the most part. One thing that I did want to say is that the CPU fan was not working for a bit, so the temps did increase. However, it didn't really affect performance, and I fixed the tune after, so yeah. And now finally, we are on the high settings, which is often the default settings when playing the game. The difference in overall FPS isn't as high as you might think. We're only getting around 10 to 20 FPS less than at the lowest settings. However, at the lowest settings, if you remember, the game looked really pixelated and was honestly kind of a mess. So I don't think it's worth it unless you have a really low end PC. Anyways, once we get inside the facility, our FPS stabilizes again. This time we're getting between 160 and 180 FPS. Like I said before, depending on the size of the facility, the moon that you're on, and what's happening on the screen, your FPS may vary quite a lot. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, so if you found this video useful or entertaining, subscribing is always appreciated. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.